Vignette 10. Zawar 1 by Lieutenant Omar and Malawi Nezamuddin Haqqani. Zawar was a Mujahideen base in Paktia province located some 4 kilometers from the Pakistan border. A 15-kilometer road goes from Zawar to the major Pakistani forward supply base at Miram Shah. Zawar began as a Mujahideen training center and expanded into a major Mujahideen combat base for supply, training, and staging. As the base expanded, Mujahideen used bulldozers and explosives to dig at least 11 tunnels into the southeast-facing ridge of Sodyaki Gar Mountain. These huge tunnels stretched to 500 meters and contained a hotel, a mosque, arms depots and repair shops, a garage, a medical point, a radio center, and a kitchen. A gasoline generator even provided power to the tunnels and the hotel's video player. This impressive base became a mandatory stop for visiting journalists, congressmen, and other war tourists. Apparently, this construction effort also often interfered with basic construction of fighting positions and field fortifications. The Mujahideen Zawar Regiment, some 500 strong, was permanently based there. This regiment was primarily responsible for logistics support of the mobile groups fighting in the area and for supplying the Islamic Party, HIK, groups in other provinces of Afghanistan. Due to the primary logistics function, the regiment was not fully equipped for combat, but was a credible combat force. The regiment was responsible for local defense and for blocking infiltration of COD and KGB agents between Afghanistan and Pakistan. They manned checkpoints along the road to screen identification papers. The regiment had a Soviet D-30 122mm howitzer, 2 tanks, captured from the DRA post at Bari in 1983, some 6-barrel Chinese-manufactured BM-12 MRL, and some machine guns and small arms. A Mujahideen Air Defense Company also defended Zawar with 5 ZPU-1 and 4 ZPU-2 anti-aircraft heavy machine guns. The air defense machine guns were positioned on high ground around the base. Defense of the approaches to the base was the responsibility of other Mujahideen groups. In September 1985, the DRA moved elements of the DRA 12th Infantry Division from Gardez, with elements of the 37th and 38th Commando Brigades. They moved from Gardez circuitously through Jaji Maidan to Khost, since the direct route through the Sadaqadao Pass had been under Mujahideen control since 1981. This force joined elements of the 25th Infantry Division, which was garrisoned in Khost. Shahnawaz Thani commanded his mixed force. The DRA military units had their full complement of weapons and equipment, but desertion, security details, and other duties kept their units chronically under strength. Since the DRA could not mobilize sufficient force from one regiment or division, they practiced tactical cannibalism and formed composite forces for these missions. Late one September afternoon, the DRA force began an infantry attack supported by heavy artillery fire and airstrikes on Bari, which is northeast of Zawar. Map 11-13, Zawar 1. Zawar was not prepared for this attack since most of its major commanders, including Haqqani, were on the pilgrimage to Mecca, the Hajj. The DRA recaptured Bari and drove on to Zawar. The Mujahideen reacted by positioning an 80-man group to block the ridge on the eastern slope of the Mughalai Mountains, which form the eastern wall of the Zawar base. The DRA force arrived at night and, during the night fighting, lost 2 APCs and 4 trucks. Eventually, the DRA became discouraged, withdrew, and returned to Khost. Mujahideen from the nomad Kochi tribe, led by Malang Kochi, Dadmir Kochi, and Gorbez Mujahideen, recaptured Bari. The DRA then launched its next attempt from the town of Thani. They recaptured the town of Lizhai from the Mujahideen and killed Commander Malawi Ahmad Gul. The major commanders returned to Pakistan from the Hajj on that day, 4 September, and hurried north to Zawar to take command. The Mujahideen from Lezhai retreated south while a 20-man Mujahideen force blocked the Mane Kiandao Pass. The pass is dominated by a high peak which is capped with a thick rock slab. Under the slab was a natural cave which the Mujahideen improved. The cave could accommodate the 20 Mujahideen during artillery and airstrikes. The Mujahideen also dug communications trenches so that they could quickly reoccupy their fighting positions once the firing stopped. The firing positions dominated the Tani Plain and were well positioned to stop any infantry attack. The DRA repeatedly attacked the pass but could make no headway. The infantry would attack, meet withering Mujahideen fire, and stop. Then massed air and artillery would pound the area. The infantry would again try to attack, but would again be stopped immediately. The procedure would then repeat itself, but the DRA made no headway during its 10-day attack. After 10 days, the DRA called in heavy Soviet airstrikes, which continuously hit the mountaintop. The thick rock slab began to sway and rock. The Mujahideen were afraid that the rock slab might shift and crush their cave, so they finally withdrew. It was 14 September 1985. As the Mujahideen fell back, the DRA established OPs on high ground and started adjusting air and artillery strikes. This gave the tactical advantage to the DRA, and their infantry moved through the pass. The Mujahideen rear guard desperately engaged the DRA infantry with machine gun fire and aircraft with ZGU machine guns. The DRA continued to advance and seized the high ground of Tor Kamar. Tor Kamar is within a kilometer of Zawar base and well within the range of machine gun fire. The DRA thought that the Mujahideen did not have any heavy weapons and became careless and bunched their forces on the high ground. Two Mujahideen, Alam Jam and Muhammad Salim, were former tank commanders in the DRA. In the late afternoon, they moved their tanks out of the caves and swung north into firing positions. They opened fire, and their first rounds destroyed a DRA OP, sending an artillery OP scope and soldiers flying. The Mujahideen tankers then traversed to the second OP and destroyed it with their next rounds. Then they opened up on the other DRA soldiers. The mauled DRA force fell back and maneuvered through the bird-dropping saddle to the east side of Tamburi Gar. The Mujahideen countered with blocking positions which they held for 5 days. Haji Amunallah Khan and Ismail Khan played major roles in the fighting at this stage. The DRA commander, General Tani, moved his CP into the Mane Kiandao Pass and tried to reinvigorate the DRA assault, but the Mujahideen held. During the fighting, the Mujahideen shot down a helicopter but lost a major commander, Malawi Fatullah. Mujahideen reinforcements arrived from Pakistan and as far away as Jalalabad and Urgun. Commander Malawi Arsala arrived. The DRA were getting chronically low on men and supplies, and after 42 days of fighting, General Tani broke contact and conducted a night withdrawal. Mujahideen casualties were 106 MA and 321 WIA. DRA and Soviet losses were heavy, but their numbers were unknown because they evacuated their dead and wounded. Commentary. Zawar was a symbol of Mujahideen invincibility in the border area, and the Soviets and DRA felt that they had to destroy this myth. The Mujahideen were convinced that Zawar was impregnable and failed to take some basic security precautions. September through October and March through April were historically the best months in Afghanistan for campaigning since the weather is reasonable and the roads are dry. August through September that year was also the time of the Hajj, and the senior leadership of the area all made this religious pilgrimage together. Consequently, the senior leadership was absent when the battle started, and other Mujahideen commanders had to take command of the battle. Field fortifications around Zawar were neglected and incomplete. The excellent field fortifications at the mouth of the Mane Kiandao Pass bought time to improve the other fortifications. The complacent attitude almost cost the Mujahideen their base. Only the unexpected appearance of Mujahideen armor at a crucial minute prevented a DRA victory. The Mujahideen were able to move men and supplies from Miram Shah in Pakistan throughout the battle. The DRA apparently made no attempts to impede access by deploying scatterable mines against the route. Vignette 11. Zawar 2 by Lieutenant Omar Malawi Nezamuddin Haqqani and Malawi Abdul Rahman. On 2 April 1986, Malawi Nezamuddin Haqqani was in the Zadran area when he saw approximately 20 transport helicopters flying over. He radioed the commanders at Zawar and warned them. He expected that the helicopters would land at Lezhai or Darakai. After his radio message, he saw another group of helicopters, including some heavy transport helicopters, flying the same direction. These were escorted by fighter jets. He again radioed this information to Zawar. Zawar had 700 to 800 Mujahideen combatants, plus air defense forces at the time. However, Jalaluddin Haqqani, the Zawar commander, was out Miram Shah. Malawi Haqqani also radioed this information separately to Jalaluddin Haqqani, who set out immediately for Zawar. The usual Soviet DRA pattern for an attack on a Mujahideen base was to pound the area heavily with airstrikes and then follow the airstrikes with air assault landings, artillery fire, and a ground advance to link up with the air assault forces. The airstrike gave the Mujahideen commanders warning, reaction time, and a solid indicator where the attack would go. In this case, the Mujahideen were caught by surprise. Their intelligence agents within the DRA failed to tip them off, and the helicopters landed the DRA 38th Commando Brigade on 7 dispersed landing zones around Zawar. There were 15 helicopters in this first lift, which landed at 0700 hours. More lifts followed to get the entire brigade on the ground. The first 2 helicopters landed on Spin Kwara Plain. Some of the landing zones were within a kilometer of the Pakistani border, map 1114, Zawar 2. Most of the helicopters landed on the high ground to the west of Zawar. Mujahideen gunners destroyed 2 helicopters while they were on the ground. Following the air assault, Soviet jet aircraft bombed and strafed Mujahideen positions. Mujahideen air defense was not very effective against these aircraft. Instead of defending in positions being pounded by fighter bombers and close air support aircraft, the Mujahideen went on the offensive and attacked the landing zones. They quickly overran 4 landing zones and captured many of the DRA commandos. Mujahideen reinforcements moved from Miram Shah in Pakistan to Zawar and took the commandos from the rear. The commandos were trapped between 2 forces and were killed or captured. By the end of the day, the Mujahideen captured 530 commandos from the 38th Brigade. Meanwhile, Soviet aircraft with smart munitions made ordnance runs on the caves. Since the caves faced southeast toward Pakistan, the Soviet aircraft overflew Pakistan in order to turn and fly at the southern face with the smart weapons. Smart missiles hit the first western cave and killed 18 Mujahideen outright. Smart missiles hit the second western cave and collapsed the cave opening, trapping some 150 Mujahideen inside. The second cave was 150 meters long and used as the radio transmission bunker. The commander, Jalaluddin Haqqani, who had just arrived from Miram Shah, was among those trapped in the second cave. Soviet bombers followed the attack of the aircraft with the smart ordnance. They dropped tons of bombs and, in doing so, blasted away the rubble blocking the cave entrances. The trapped Mujahideen escaped. The battle for the remaining landing zones continued. There was one group of commandos on high ground who held out for 3 days before they were finally overrun. The DRA had regarrisoned Lezhai since Zawar won and had fought for the possession of the Mane Kandau Pass to Zawar for some 10 days following the air landing. Mujahideen attacked their LOCs and the airfield at Khost, while the Mujahideen holding the Mane Kandau checked their advance. In first battle for Zawar, DRA Soviet artillery and airstrikes stopped at night, but this time they were conducted around the clock. At night, they dropped aerial flares for illumination. This heavy fire support continued for 12 days. Finally, more DRA and Soviet forces came from Khost through Tani to reinforce the effort at Lezhai. The Mujahideen fell back from the Lezhai area into the higher mountains, and slowly the DRA Soviet force moved through the Mane Kandau. At the same time, the DRA Soviet force launched a flanking column from the Lezhai area that moved to the east. This column moved toward Moghulgai Mountain on the east flank of Zawar. There, a regiment of HIH Mujahideen waited in defense. However, as the DRA column neared, the HIH regiment withdrew without a fight. At the same time, Jalaluddin Haqqani was wounded by attacking aircraft. He had head and facial wounds, but rumors spread among the Mujahideen that Haqqani was dead. The Mujahideen evacuated Zawar and moved high into the surrounding mountains as the two ground columns closed into Zawar after 12 days of combat. The DRA held Zawar for only 5 hours. Mujahideen had moved MRL up to the Pakistan border and fired on the communists. The DRA hurriedly tried to destroy the caves with explosives and booby-trapped the area. They also planted seismic detonated mines in the area and sprinkled aerial-delivered butterfly bombs over the area. The DRA took pictures for their propaganda victory and withdrew to their base camps. The Mujahideen returned to Zawar on the following day. The first Mujahideen to enter the area were killed by seismic mines. The Mujahideen withdrew and fired mortars, BM-12, and machine guns into the area to set off the seismic mines. Then they began the slow process of finding the rest of the mines manually. The Mujahideen pushed forward from Zawar to retake Lezhai and other areas. Since the DRA was only in Zawar for 5 hours, the DRA did not manage to destroy the caves, but just collapsed some entrances. Weapons that were stored in the caves were still intact and usable inside. From this experience, the Mujahideen learned to make connecting tunnels between caves. They reopened the caves and built connecting tunnels. The caves were improved and lengthened to 400 to 500 meters long. Mujahideen casualties were 281 KIA and 363 WIA. DRA and Soviet losses were unknown, but the Mujahideen destroyed 2 helicopters on the ground, shot down 2 jets, and captured 530 personnel of the 38th Commando Brigade. The Mujahideen held a field tribunal. Yunus Khalis and others were the judges. They tried and executed Colonel Qalandar Shah, the commander of the brigade, and another colonel who landed with the brigade to adjust artillery fire. There were 78 other officers among the prisoners. They were given a chance to confess to their crimes from different battles, and then all the officers were executed. All the soldiers were given amnesty since they were conscripts who were forced to fight. The amnestied soldiers were asked to perform 2 years of labor service in exchange for their amnesty. They did their service in logistics, were re-educated, and released after 2 years. Commentary. The withdrawal of the HIH regiment, coupled with the rumors of Haqqani's death, greatly aided the DRA victory. Haqqani's loss, besides affecting Mujahideen morale, cost the Mujahideen what little command and control they had left at this juncture of the battle. The DRA failed to throw a blocking force on the Miram Shah Road, although they knew that Mujahideen reinforcements were moving along this route. As a minimum, they could have employed scatterable mines on the road, but they left the route open. Pakistan was clearly concerned with the major battle raging on her border and reportedly transported Mujahideen to the border and supplied MRL to the Mujahideen who fired them across the border into Zawar. The Mujahideen lacked effective air defense against helicopter gunships and the strafing and bombing attacks of high-performance aircraft. The Mujahideen had some British blowpipe shoulder-fired air defense missiles, but they were not effective. Pakistan sent some officers into Zawar during the fighting to take out attacking aircraft with the British blowpipe shoulder-fired missiles and show the Mujahideen how it was done. After climbing a mountain and firing 13 blowpipe missiles to no avail, a Pakistani captain and his NCO were severely wounded by the attacking aircraft. The DRA celebrated the fall of Zawar as a major victory, but Zawar was back in full operation within weeks of the attack.